My family was ruined by a billionaire's lie, so I took everything from him, one piece at a time. I was born into nothing. Not the kind of, we didn't have a pool, nothing. I mean real, biting, hunger in your bones kind of nothing. My mom died when I was 5 from a blood infection she couldn't afford antibiotics for. My dad lasted until I was 11 before liver cancer took him. No treatments, just pain and silence. The only family I had left was my older sister, Jenna. She was 19 when she took me in, gave up her scholarship to raise me. She worked double shifts as a waitress, did online classes on breaks, and somehow still made time to help me with my homework. Jenna was my entire world. My sister, my mom, my hero. And then Grant Mercer destroyed her. Grant was the golden boy of Mercer Tech, a self-made billionaire, or so the headlines said. What they didn't mention was how many people he crushed getting there. Jenna got hired as his personal assistant through a college program. She was thrilled. I still remember her running into our tiny apartment, waving the offer letter saying, "This is it, Levi. Everything's about to change." And it did, for the worse. Within 3 months, Jenna was a wreck. She cried in the shower, flinched when her phone buzzed, stopped eating. I didn't know what was going on, not at first. Then one day, she came home early. I found her on the floor of our kitchen, just sitting there shaking. She said Grant threatened her, that he made her falsify financial documents, that if she didn't, he'd leak edited videos of her and claim she was blackmailing him. I told her we had to go to the police. She just laughed, bitter and broken. You think they'll believe a broke girl from the East Side over a billionaire with his name on a hospital wing? 2 weeks later, she was found dead. The official cause? Suicide. But I knew better. I knew Mercer killed her, maybe not with his hands, but with power, with silence, with manipulation. I was 15 years old, alone in the world, and all I had left was rage. So I made a promise over her grave. I would bring Grant Mercer down. I'd burn his empire to ash and make him feel every ounce of pain he ever caused. Not just to Jenna, but to every person he thought he could crush without consequence. It took years. I lived in shelters, worked warehouse jobs, and studied him like a religion. I memorized his habits, his networks, his weaknesses. By 28 years old, I was a ghost, a shadow. And Mercer, he didn't even remember my sister's name, but he would. Soon, very soon. I didn't go to college, I couldn't afford it. But I made friends with people who could. I cleaned dorm bathrooms for minimum wage while listening to Ivy League lectures through cracked earbuds. I read textbooks people threw away. I built my skills in silence. By the time I was 23 years old, I had taught myself everything from forensic accounting to network security. I even got a job under a fake name at one of Mercer's subsidiaries, Coldstream Solutions, entry-level tech support. But it was enough to slip through the cracks and start digging. Mercer Tech was clean on the surface, pristine even, but underneath? It was a labyrinth of shell companies, offshore accounts, and fraudulent patents. I took my time, downloading encrypted files, tracing signatures, learning which passwords opened which vaults. I didn't leak anything, not yet, because nuclear revenge isn't about chaos, it's about precision. I needed allies, not friends. This wasn't personal to them. I needed people who hated Mercer for their own reasons, and I found them. There was Natalie Cruz, a fired engineer who claimed Mercer stole her designs and patented them under his name. There was Jun Park, a former data analyst who caught Mercer laundering funds through a children's cancer foundation, and got blacklisted when he reported it. And there was Marcus Bellamy, a cybersecurity specialist who did 3 years in prison for a hack Mercer paid him for, then pinned on him. We were from different walks of life, but we had one thing in common. Grant Mercer ruined us. Together, we became the syndicate. For 2 years, we planted seeds. Natalie slipped false schematics into the patent pipeline. Jun created subtle anomalies in the financial records. Marcus backdoored the entire Mercer Tech network. And me? I became Levi Black. Not the broken little brother anymore. A new name, a new face. I spent every dime I had on a complete identity makeover. I built a portfolio, launched a fake think tank, and used forged credentials to infiltrate Mercer's world from the top down. It worked. By 31 years old, I was standing in Mercer's penthouse office, shaking his hand. "You've got vision, Levi," he said. "Reminds me of myself at your age." I wanted to break his fingers, but I smiled and thanked him. That day, I planted a listening device under his desk, and the next morning, I watched as he screamed at a board member over the phone, threatening to have their family handled if they didn't approve a buyout. I clipped the recording and filed it away. One piece in the puzzle. Mercer had forgotten my sister, but I would make damn sure the world never forgot what he did. The key to destroying a man like Mercer wasn't brute force. It was rot. Slow, creeping, irreversible rot from the inside. We began with his reputation. Natalie created a leak of faulty prototype data that Mercer had personally greenlit. She fed it to a startup press outlet we knew Mercer ignored. Within 3 weeks, investors were whispering. One called the product dangerously untested during an earnings call. Mercer exploded. I watched from across the conference room table as his smile cracked and his hands trembled. Good. That was just the beginning. Next came the silent audits. Jun forged anonymous complaints to the IRS and SEC, citing irregularities we seeded over the last 2 years. Investigators came sniffing, not because of evidence, but because the syndicate created smoke in just the right places. Mercer's team scrambled. I sat in strategy meetings as they tried to plug holes in ships they didn't know were already sinking. Mercer kept promoting me. "You're the only one who seems to understand the damn system," he'd say. I understood it because I built the traps. Then came the personal strikes. We hacked into his home security system, not to steal, not yet, just to rearrange. One day, his thermostat set itself to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Another, the lights flickered at exactly 3:17 in the morning. Every night for a week, the same door creaked open at 2:09, even though the log showed it was locked. He called in an exorcist. Marcus laughed for hours. Then we hit his son. Not physically, just his scholarship. Mercer had pulled strings to get his son, Bryce, into a prestigious tech university. We sent the admissions board anonymous proof that Bryce's application essay was plagiarized. We made sure to highlight Mercer's generous donation and how it violated ethics policies. Bryce was expelled. That was the first time I saw fear on Grant Mercer's face. He held a press conference the next day, blamed cancel culture. The stock dropped 8%. It was beautiful. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. We were ready to make the first real move, the one that would change everything. An anonymous tip to the FBI. We included just enough documents to look legit, filtered through a fake whistleblower shell. We even staged a recorded phone call between Mercer and a fictional arms dealer using deepfake voice software. We didn't need it to stick, just to make them look. And they did. 2 agents showed up at headquarters. Mercer called it political theater. I called it foreplay, because I wasn't after his money. I wanted his name, his legacy, his peace. The syndicate wasn't built for exposure. It was built for annihilation, and the world was about to watch Grant Mercer unravel in high definition. And when it did, I'd be there, front row, smiling. The FBI visit shook Mercer, but not enough to break him. Men like that don't shatter with noise. They crack in silence. That's why I went for the one thing he still trusted without question, his inner circle. He had 5 top executives he called his iron spine. They'd been with him since the early days. I planted a virus in their internal messaging app, a modified keylogger wrapped in a fake security patch. In 2 weeks, I had everything. Passwords, private files, and years of dirty secrets. One of them, Helen Drake, had been embezzling funds through shell nonprofits. Another, Carl Yates, had offshore accounts linked to illegal mining operations. We gathered the evidence, scrubbed it clean, and dumped it in anonymous email tips to international watchdog groups. By the time Mercer figured out what was happening, 3 of his top 5 had fled the country. 1 was arrested at the airport. The board panicked. Stocks plummeted. Whispers of collapse started making headlines. And I got promoted again. "Chief Strategy Officer," he said. "You're the only one I can rely on." The irony almost made me laugh. Then came the news that changed everything. A new lawsuit had been filed against Mercer Tech, a wrongful death suit. The plaintiff? My name, my real one. I'd filed it anonymously at first, through an attorney we'd planted in the media circuit. The claim was emotional distress and indirect corporate coercion leading to my sister's suicide. But now, I wanted Mercer to see the name. I wanted him to read Levi Crawford in court papers and feel the blood drain from his face. He did. He called me into his office, poured 2 glasses of bourbon, didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "You know, I always thought Jenna was unstable." My vision blurred. My nails dug into my palm. "She talked too much," he added. "Would have ruined everything." I stared at him for a full 10 seconds. Then I raised my glass. "To the past," I said. He clinked it. That night I uploaded everything. The files, the recordings, the documents, hundreds of gigabytes. I sent copies to every major news outlet, every regulatory agency, and every major shareholder in Mercer Tech. And then I walked away. No dramatic showdown, no confrontation. Just silence. The next morning, the world exploded. Headlines screamed corruption. Talk shows dissected his empire. Former employees came forward in droves. The FBI launched a formal investigation. Shareholders filed lawsuits. Grant Mercer's empire didn't just fall, it imploded. But this wasn't the end. It was only the first strike. Because I hadn't taken his fortune, I was about to take his future. After the leak, Mercer vanished from public view for a while. No more press conferences, no LinkedIn updates, just silence. But I knew where he was. In the panic, he retreated to his private estate in the Adirondacks, a glass fortress hidden in the mountains. Isolated, gated, guarded, but not impenetrable. I didn't need to get inside. I just needed to be close enough to listen. Marcus had already looped into the satellite uplink for Mercer's private security feed. Jun piggybacked off the estate's Wi-Fi through a drone we flew overhead for just 7 seconds. It was enough. We watched him pace in his study, day after day. Sometimes he screamed. Sometimes he drank. Sometimes he just stood at the window, staring at nothing. We saw his wife pack her bags and leave. We saw him throw a glass at the wall afterward. He was unraveling. And that's when I struck again. See, Grant Mercer didn't keep his money in stocks like a normal billionaire. He kept it in crypto wallets, real estate trusts, and international private vaults. Untouchable, right? Wrong. I had been copying his digital keys for months, one by one, without him noticing. I watched him log into cold wallets. I mimicked his biometric patterns with high-resolution images taken from his own webcam. And when he fled to the Adirondacks, I triggered the final phase. We drained $76 million in under 4 hours. Gone. Reallocated. Not to us, but to every employee Mercer had ever fired for whistleblowing. Every foundation he defunded. Every town he bankrupted with a failed factory. He woke up the next morning to find himself on the cover of every financial paper in the world. Mercer's millions redistributed in historic cyber Robin Hood heist. His lawyers quit. His bank froze his assets. The IRS opened an emergency audit. The man who once bought judges and elections couldn't even buy a decent cup of coffee. Then came the best part. He called me. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Levi Black," I said, cool and calm. Silence. Then, "It was you." I smiled. "All of it. You think you've won." His voice cracked like a brittle bone. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. Just smarter and more patient. I'll find you. You already did, I replied. You shook my hand, Grant, promoted me, poured me bourbon. Silence again. Then a whisper. Why? You murdered my sister. I ended the call. That night, Mercer tried to get on a private flight to Dubai. He never made it. Customs flagged his passport. Federal agents were waiting. And just like that, the man who thought he ruled the world was wearing handcuffs in a gray holding room at JFK International Airport. The syndicate had done its job, but there was still one more thing I needed to do. Tell the world who I was. I posted the video on a Monday morning. No fancy edits, no dramatic music. Just me, in a plain room, wearing a black hoodie and speaking directly into the camera. My name is Levi Crawford. I am the younger brother of Jenna Crawford, who took her own life after being blackmailed and destroyed by Grant Mercer. I laid it all out, how she was coerced, how she was silenced, how Mercer used power to erase her. Then I told them what I had done. Every phase, every move, every dollar redirected. I named the syndicate members with their permission. I made one thing clear. We weren't criminals. We were reckoning. By the time the 10-minute video ended, it had already gone viral. 3 hours later, #, Justice for Jenna was trending #1 worldwide. The media tried to spin it both ways. Some called me a terrorist. Others called me a hero. I didn't care. I wasn't trying to win a debate. I was telling the truth. Natalie went on a podcast and laid out her blueprints, how Mercer stole her work and threatened her into silence. Jun released internal Mercer tech audits proving child labor in overseas facilities. Marcus uploaded the entire Mercer Tech employee blacklist and the transcripts showing how whistleblowers were crushed. We had receipts. People listened. People cared. And then the comments started pouring in. Update. User B12. My dad was one of the engineers Mercer fired after a workplace injury. We lost everything. Thank you, Levi. Seriously, thank you. Tech Revenger 78. This is the kind of story that will be studied in law schools for years. Holy hell. Just Jenna 77. I'm crying. She didn't deserve what happened. No one believed her. I'm glad someone made them listen. OP. Levi Crawford. Thank you. She deserved justice. Now she has it. The lawsuits piled in like a tidal wave. Mercer's lawyers quit one by one. The Department of Justice confirmed formal criminal charges, tax fraud, racketeering, corporate coercion, and multiple counts of obstruction. His bail was denied. And I was offered a book deal. 3 publishers, 7 figures. I turned them all down. This was never about profit. It was about something much deeper. That night, I returned to Jenna's grave for the first time in years. I stood there in the dark, wind cutting through my coat, fingers trembling as I placed a single lily on the stone. I did it, I whispered. A gust passed through the trees like a sigh. For the first time in forever, my chest didn't feel heavy. But there was still more to come. The trial, the fallout, the rebuilding. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the start of a legacy. The trial was broadcast live. Day after day, the world watched Grant Mercer sit in a courtroom, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. No custom suit, no entourage. Just a trembling man in a beige prison-issued blazer trying to remember how power used to feel. The prosecution was relentless. They played the audio recordings. They showed the documents. They brought forward the whistleblowers, over 30 of them. Natalie testified with fire in her voice. June spoke with quiet precision. Marcus read from a log of Mercer's internal emails, each line more damning than the last. And then they called me. I stepped into that courtroom wearing Jenna's favorite color, deep forest green. I looked Mercer in the eye and felt nothing but clarity. My sister trusted him, I told the jury. She gave him everything. He used her, broke her, and made the world believe she was the villain. The room was silent. She wasn't weak. She was strong, but even strong people have limits. And he pushed her past them. He didn't pull the trigger, but he handed her the gun. I watched Mercer flinch. Just once. Just enough. 3 days later, the verdict came in. Guilty. On all counts. He was sentenced to 60 years without parole. People outside the courthouse erupted in cheers. I didn't join them. I just closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. Update. Dark Web Dave. This is better than any movie I've seen in 20 years. Justice for Jenna. I watched every second of the trial. I've never cried harder. Levi, if you see this, you did her proud. Ope, Levi Crawford. She carried me through my darkest days. This was the least I could do. Ash's empire. What happens next? You've burned down an empire. What do you build in its place? That question stayed with me, because revenge is satisfying, but it's not purpose. So I created something new, the Crawford Foundation. It's funded entirely by the assets we recovered, legally, ethically, and transparently. We help whistleblowers, fund education for victims of corporate abuse, provide legal defense to those fighting against giants. We don't just fight corruption. We arm others to do the same. Natalie runs engineering scholarships. Jun heads the Fraud Investigation Fund. Marcus built our cybersecurity wing from the ground up. And me. I speak. I teach. I travel to places where hope feels thin and remind people that power doesn't just belong to the rich. It belongs to the determined. And in quiet moments, I write letters to Jenna. I tell her about the kids getting a second chance, the workers getting justice, the boardrooms that now carry fear when they used to carry arrogance. One empire died, another rose from its ashes, and this one, it belongs to the people. 6 months after the verdict, I visited the prison, not for closure, for clarity. They brought Mercer into the visitation room in chains. He was thinner, grayer, smaller. The guards didn't even pretend to respect him. No nods, no special treatment. He sat down across from me. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. "You came to gloat?" he asked, voice hoarse. "No," I said. "I came to make sure you understood." "Understood what?" "That you never broke us." He scoffed. "Your sister's dead." I leaned in slightly. "But her name lives. Her story lives. Her face is on billboards and in classrooms and on the lips of people you'll never be able to reach." His face twitched. Rage flickered behind his eyes. "She was weak." "No," I said. "She was strong enough to survive you until the weight crushed her. I carried that weight, and I used it to crush you back." He leaned back, silent. I stood up. "This is the last time you'll ever see me. The world has moved on, and so have I." I walked out without looking back. Update. Exiled CEO. It's haunting how calm he stayed. I don't know if I could have done that. Sister Soul, 77. I wish someone had fought like that for my sister. Levi, you're a symbol now. Up. Levi Crawford. I'm not a symbol. I'm a brother. That's all I ever wanted to be. The foundation expanded quickly. We launched programs in 7 countries, partnered with international watchdog groups, helped overturn wrongful convictions. One of our biggest victories came when a 24-year-old factory worker in the Philippines, who lost her arm in unsafe conditions, won a historic lawsuit using evidence we helped surface. She sent me a letter. It read, "You don't know me, but because of you, I get to live." I kept that letter, framed it beside Jenna's old photo, the one where she's laughing in the park, holding a melting popsicle, the sun catching her hair just right. One night, I was asked to speak at a memorial service for whistleblowers who had lost their lives. I stood at the podium, heart pounding, and said, "They tried to make us disappear, but we aren't shadows. We're fire, and fire doesn't vanish, it spreads." The room stood as one. Applause thundered. I didn't cry, not until I stepped off stage and a young girl ran up to me, hugged my leg, and whispered, I want to be brave like you." That's when I knew. Revenge was complete, but impact was just beginning. And Jenna, she was everywhere now. 1 year after the trial, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Jenna Crawford Justice Center. It was built on the land where Mercer Tech's headquarters used to stand. We bought it in a bankruptcy auction for $1. $1. I stood in front of a crowd of reporters, survivors, families, and former employees. Behind me stood the new building, glass, steel, and stone, etched with thousands of names. Names of the people Mercer hurt, names of the people we helped. I cut the ribbon with Jenna's name engraved on the blade. The applause didn't feel like celebration. It felt like vindication. Later that evening, I sat in my office overlooking the city. The same skyline Jenna once dreamed of climbing. The same lights she used to point out from our window as a kid. "Someday, Levi," she once said, "we'll have a view like that." Now I did, not just for me, for both of us. There was a knock on the door. It was Natalie. She handed me a file. "Final report on Mercer," she said. Inside were photos, prison logs, psychological evaluations, notes from group therapy. "He doesn't talk much," she said, "but when he does, it's always about her." I closed the file. "I don't care," I said quietly. "He doesn't deserve the space in my head anymore." She nodded and left me alone. I opened my laptop and pulled up the live feed of one of our outreach centers in Kenya. Kids were learning to code on recycled laptops, smiling, laughing, becoming something new. Then I checked the inbox. One new message. Subject: "You saved my life." From Unknown, Sender 93. "Dear Levi, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but after I watched your story, I decided not to jump. I got help. I'm still here. I'm going back to school." Thank you. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Jenna had once saved me. Now, through me, she was saving others. Update. Justice burns bright. Mercer used to own the skyline. Now his victim's name lights it up. That's real justice. Opu, Levi Crawford. The real justice is what comes next. What we do with the world we reclaimed. I visited her grave again that weekend. This time I brought company. Hundreds of people showed up. Survivors, supporters, the syndicate. We held a candlelight vigil. We told stories. We sang. We laughed. We cried. As the candles flickered and the stars came out, I looked around and realized something. This wasn't just revenge. It was rebirth. And her name, her story, would never be forgotten again. Not in my lifetime. Not ever. 3 years after Mercer's fall, I found myself standing backstage at the Global Justice Summit in Geneva. They were about to give me an award. Lifetime Achievement in Social Impact. I was 34 years old. A producer clipped a mic to my lapel. The crowd was standing room only. Heads of state, activists, CEOs who now feared silence more than noise. They called my name. I stepped onto the stage. Flashes went off. Applause thundered. I adjusted the mic, took a breath, and said, "I'm not a hero." The room quieted. I'm just someone who refused to let the story end the way they wanted it to. I spoke about Jenna, about what she endured, about how the systems that failed her can never be allowed to stand untouched. I didn't make it about revenge. I made it about responsibility. By the time I finished, some were crying. All were standing. Later that night at the gala, a young woman approached me. She wore a press badge and a nervous smile. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "can I ask one question?" I nodded. "If you could go back, do it all again, would you?" I looked at her, really looked, and then I said, "Every second." Not because I enjoyed it, not because it was easy, but because some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. That same year, Mercer died in prison. Heart failure. No visitors, no obituary. His legacy was silence. Jenna's was everywhere. Murals, scholarships, documentaries, schools named after her, lives saved in her honor. The foundation went global. We trained investigative journalists. We provided encrypted tools to whistleblowers. We helped pass 5 new protection laws across 3 countries. But I stepped back. It was time for others to lead. I moved to a small cabin near a lake up north. Quiet, peaceful. I still consult when needed. Still write, still speak now and then. But mostly, I live. I take long walks, read old books, watch the sunrise. Sometimes, when the wind's just right, I hear Jenna's laugh in the trees, and I smile. Update. One last comment. Levi Crawford changed the world, not with weapons, not with power, but with love, loss, and relentless purpose. O.P. Levi Crawford. If you're reading this, wondering if it's worth it, it is. Keep going. Tell your story. Someone needs it. Because the truth, it doesn't die. It waits for someone brave enough to carry it. That someone was me. But it can be you, too. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Pizza Reddit for more fun stories. Comment which Reddit group you'd like to see more stories from.